This journey of how a day can look in healthier eating is much easier than you think. We're going to start with rethinking our drink. So when we think about the hydration station, we think about filling up a pitcher of water. Hot months like it icy, so just filling up a pitcher, and how to make it more interesting. This is a great way to see what's in your fridge, or even if you have a little garden where you have some herbs growing. Grabbing things that can give you much more interest in the drinking. And people tend to grab more. We think of spa water as something that you do luxuriously only when you go to a spa, but it's something you can do every day. So here I'm going to grab some strawberries. And again, it just takes a couple strawberries. So if you have had strawberries for breakfast and now you're creating your hydration station for the day, grab a couple of those strawberries. I'm just going to show you basics on knife skills. So when you hold a knife, ideally in your household, if you want to have one knife that it really is your friend, you want a chef's knife. You want one that feels good in your hand. And when you hold it, you want to use your first and second finger to pinch just at the bottom of the knife. And this gives you maneuverability. Then the third, fourth, and fifth digit are really what give you power, because the goal is that the knife is the extension of your hand. So I'm going to use that. And then when you're cutting, you're mainly using the middle two-thirds of your knife, and you're mainly doing a rocking motion. The sharper your knife is, the less likely you are to cut yourself. Often when your knife is dull, your hands can slip or the knife can slip, and you're much more likely to cut yourself. The other part is you want to make sure that you claw your hand, so you're creating a flat surface. Okay, so you want to make sure your fingers are not in the way. Our goal is to create a surface to cut on that leaves our fingers and our digits out of the way of potentially cutting ourselves. These have been washed. You don't need to remove the stems. And I'm using that rocking motion, 2/3. And I'm putting them in my pitcher. And I'm just putting a couple of those. And some people ask me, well, isn't this just as bad as fruit juice because I am putting a fruit in there? And the infusion of that flavor is very different than if I had a full glass of, again, orange juice. So it does not raise your blood sugars because you're just infusing it with that flavor. You can use any herb, and if you have a little garden, it's a great place to use it. Today I'm using a little bit of basil, and you can put the full leaves in there or you can cut them up. So in this case, I'm just tearing them off. And I'm just putting in the pitcher. And that's it. So here we have this. We're going to let it infuse. And over the day, it's going to infuse. If you finish your pitcher, you just refill it. You can use the same fruits. I am going to add a little bit of citrus. I just noticed we have lemons over here, so I'm going to add that as well. You want to use it for about a day. It doesn't keep by the next day, especially citrus tends to get a little bit bitter. So here's another demo on cutting. If you have something round like this, you want to get to a flat edge as quickly as possible, again, to avoid cutting yourself. So we're creating an arch where I'm going to put my knife through. And now that I have a flat surface, as soon as possible, I'm putting that flat surface down. And again, I'm clawing my hand and using the 2/3, I'm just creating slices of that lemon. And I'm just putting those lemon slices right in my pitcher. Just going back to mentioning a few things with the water, I just want to give you some visual things. So if any of you, here we are in San Diego where we love our Mexican food, and you've ever had hibiscus or agua de Jamaica, these are hibiscus flowers, and you can buy them actually at several grocery stores now. And you can make a tea with it, just like you would make any other tea. So essentially boiling water, putting the hibiscus tea in it. It's a bitter taste, but again, making it yourself, you can add the sweetness that you want. One more idea for beverage is actually this that looks like something that would want to be thrown out. This is actually lemongrass. I plucked it out of my garden a couple days ago. You can make tea with this as well. We think of lemongrass often in Thai type dishes, but lemongrass grows really well here in San Diego. It essentially grows like a weed, and it makes a beautiful, delicious tea that has a beautiful golden color to it. Really good for the body, and it tastes good as is, but you can also add some sweetness if you want to. And if you add sweetness, again, you want to go with the least processed possible. So things like honey or agave, but not to forget that sugar is sugar is sugar. So it doesn't mean that the health halo of honey or agave means that you can just go to town and have as much as you want. Last piece on drinking our calories is when we think of soda. So just to give you an idea what we want to move away from. So to give you context, this is the amount of sugar that's in a 16-ounce bottle of Coca-Cola. This is 12 teaspoons of sugar, which is equivalent to 54 grams of sugar. Most adults should not be getting more than 20 to 25 grams of sugar in a day. So if we do our math, rough math, this is double the amount that we should be getting of added sugar. In a whole day, we're getting it in one soda. Much better, let's choose wisely and think about where we're getting that extra sugar. And the mindlessness of grabbing a soda because we're used to it, that's something we want to move away from. And often think about, why are you reaching for that soda? Are you tired? Are you maybe not getting enough sleep? Are you thirsty? Do you feel like you need a pick-me-up? Which, let's remember, sodas pretty much have caffeine and sugar in them. Or is it just that you're thirsty and you like that mouthfeel of bubbly? So how about a sparkling water with some added slices of fruit? So finding ways of getting your needs met in a way that's not affecting your health in a negative way. Now I'm going to show you how to cook a whole grain. As I mentioned earlier, whole grains usually take a lot longer to cook than your white grains, so things like white rice. Again, optimize the choice that you make to bring home. So here we're actually using bulgur. Bulgur is a whole grain, and it has been ground. And when you grind it, essentially, and the store will grind it for you, it's already, you purchase it pre-ground, it makes it much faster to cook. So this doesn't, they haven't processed it, meaning they haven't removed the husk or the germ. So you still have all the parts to it, but it's just going to cook faster because it's in smaller pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a cup of the bulgur. And it's okay if a little splays out over. We're not baking, so we don't need to be exact. And we're just putting that right in a bowl. And then I'm adding boiled water. So this is an electric tea kettle. You can boil stovetop water, but you want it boiling. And then I'm going to add a cup and a half of water directly into my bowl. Okay, so that's a cup and a half of water. And when you're making whole grains, you can do it plain, or you can add flavors at this point. So I'm choosing to add a little bit of salt. And when you're cooking, don't be afraid of salt. Salt is to add, to essentially bring out the natural flavors of food. The goal is not to get salty. The goal is to bring out the natural flavors. And if you ever want to test this out, if you take tomatoes, peak season tomatoes ideally, and you have a slice of tomato, take a bite. Do it again, but just put a little bit of salt on top, and you'll notice that the tomato will taste more like a tomato, so it heightens its own flavor. It doesn't become salty. So that's what we're going for here. So we're adding just a little bit of salt. And I'm going to add some herbs. So here we have some thyme. And we're going to grab some parsley as well. And I'm putting them directly in there. And what it's going to do is, as it's cooking, it infuses those flavors. And this is a great thing to do, the infusion with different flavors. You could add some garlic slices, red onions, chives. You can add anything to it. Same thing if you're doing cooking beans. It'll give much more flavor. A lot of times as people start eating, again, whole grains or beans, they find them to be a little bit bland. So adding these herbs, allumiums, which are the onions, the garlic, and otherwise, infuses them with fantastic flavor. And the beautiful thing, I'm just mixing this around a little bit just to make sure the salt goes all over, that the water gets all over the bulgur. And then I'm going to cover it with a cloth here. And we're just going to let that sit. I'm going to move it out of the way a little bit here. And you're going to see that while we're doing all these, it cooks in 15, 20 minutes. So, and you see how hands-off that is. So you see that didn't take much hands-on work. And while I'm cooking other parts or chopping my vegetables, I'm getting a whole grain that I can use, not just for this meal, but for others as well. For the better breakfast, I'm going to show you how to make overnight oats. This is a really good one to do if you live alone. You can grab 5 mason jars and make them all at the same time, and then every morning you just grab one of those mason jars. You can make a giant mason jar, which I've done several times, and you scoop out some of these overnight oats every morning and then finish off the dish. You don't need any measuring tools for this. Mason jars are really your friend. You can also use empty containers that maybe you have from nut butters or other items that you've used. So I'm going to do 1 part oats, and I'm really just eyeballing this. Okay, you can see the oats. I'm going to use some of that plain yogurt, and it can be any kind of plain yogurt. Patients often ask me, does it have to be European style or Greek yogurt? That is more your mouthfeel. European style tends to be runnier. Greek yogurt has been strained. It actually has slightly higher protein content, but it's very similar. So whichever one you enjoy. And then we're going to put our plant-based milk. So when you buy plant-based milk, you want to make sure it's unsweetened. And that is it. So you're going to cover it. Mix it, emulsify it if we were making a dressing, which we'll get to in a bit. And then you just put this in the fridge. And it's a bit like muesli if anyone's eaten more in Europe. It's essentially cold oats. So you just put this right in the fridge, and then you just grab it the next day. And again, you can make 5 of these and pluck one out every day of the week. So we're doing a little change here. So right now, if you look at this, it's a bit runny. And we're going to do a little magic. So I have one that I made earlier. Same ingredients, same mix. And now you can see that the texture has really changed quite a bit. So now it's pretty thick. So essentially the oats have infused with that milk and with the yogurt. And we're going to plate this now. So remember, if we're looking at the plate, right here we have essentially the half of the whole grains, that quarter. And we also have the protein part. So in this case, the yogurt is our protein component. And then the other piece is we need our berries. So I have my strawberries, and I'm just slicing a few strawberries. So I want to fill up half my plate with that Plant Kingdom. And every time I grab my knife, I'm saying this out loud, but I am pausing in my head and remembering, am I holding my knife correctly? So just pause for a little bit. Often when we start doing things too quickly, that's when we can cut ourselves. So I'm going to cut a couple more. It's okay if a little stem gets in there. Green's good for us. And again, there's no reason that you can't eat the strawberry stems. All right, so we have that, and we have some blueberries over here. So I'm just adding more color. So here we're going for nutrition, but we're also going for the view. When we think about what fruit, we're adding color. And like I said, each color is going to give you different nutrients. I also want to think about what's in season. If you buy fruit that's in season, the price point will be a lot lower, and that's something to think about. So if apples are in season, you can grab an apple. And again, like I said earlier, when you cut it, it's a round shape. As soon as I can, I flip it over. And now I'm just going to make cubes. And think about how you're going to be eating this. So if I am going to eat this with a spoon, I want to make sure my slices aren't so big that I can't fit this piece of apple in my mouth. So I'm making bite-sized pieces. All right, so now you notice half the plate is filled with different fruits. And a few top-off things we can add are some nuts, which will give us healthy oils. So here we have some walnuts. Just adding a few of those. Again, just taking that time, make sure it looks visually appealing. And I'm also adding some cacao nibs. Cacao nibs are essentially roasted cacao. So it's essentially on the way to make chocolate. but they haven't been ground and there's been nothing else added, no sugar, or sometimes there's oils added, which I don't recommend getting chocolates that have that. But that'll give you a little bit of the same health properties that coffee has. And it also adds a little crunch and just a little bit of it's a bitterness, but it combines really nicely with the flavors. So here we have the overnight oats. You could also choose to grate some chocolate on top. And again, when you become an informed consumer, thinking about what kind of chocolate you're getting. So this is when you know I spend a lot of time at the grocery store looking at labels. If you get a chocolate that's over 70% cacao and you see the amount of fiber that's in it and the amount of sugar, it's such a balancing act. It is amazing how much fiber you actually get in dark chocolate. So not cleansing your palate, but moving your palate towards enjoying darker chocolates is really a really good thing for your health, and you can eat your chocolate and enjoy it. So in this one here, this is a chocolate place I actually found in Idlewild, El Buen Cacao, and the family that owns the place are just incredible. And again, you can just top off with just a little bit of freshly grated chocolate. You don't have to go this fancy on a work day. You could literally just get a slightly larger mason jar, put some berries in there. You can even mix the berries in there and just grab it and take it to go, and you're all set. As we make our way through the plate, we're going to move on to the protein flip and thinking about how this could be a main course for lunch or a dinner. And the beauty is if you make a big dinner, this could also be your lunch the next day or several days in a row. We are going to make homemade dressing. This is a really great thing to learn how to make. And I'm going to make a very basic one and then know that there's a lot of variety that you can add. The more basic you make your initial one, it can actually stay in the refrigerator for up to a month. If it solidifies in the refrigerator, you can take it out while you're doing the rest of your cooking and it will become liquid again, and then you will just remix it. And I'll show you what that mixing looks like. What you'll need for this is your handy dandy mason jar, and you can use any empty container for this as well. A clear container is really helpful because getting that visual, that way you don't have to measure things, which makes things a lot easier. The oil that you choose is key when you're making your own dressings, and when you think about the foods that you're bringing into your body, which come through from the grocery store, getting oils that really optimize our health makes a big difference. So there's two things to think about with oil. One is the type of oil. So if we are thinking about what are the ones that I want to get to have at my house, I think of two main uses that I'm going to use. One is for cold uses, and things like olive oil are really fantastic for this. Olive oil has a lot of omega-3s, which are anti-inflammatory for our body, compared to a lot of dressings that you buy already made. I usually use something like corn oil or soybean oil, which are really high in omega-6, which is pro-inflammatory. And to get a little sciencey here, so our bodies are meant and need both omega-6 and omega-3. And in nature, how we would eat before processed came along, it's usually a 1-to-1 ratio. And the standard American diet, that ratio has changed to being 30 times more of the pro-inflammatory, the omega-6, to the anti-inflammatory omega-3. So anything that you can do to normalize that ratio will really help your health in the short and long term. And when I'm talking about helping your health, we're talking about decreasing risks of heart disease and stroke. It also helps decrease inflammation in our body and what that may feel like, because it can sound kind of woo-woo or kind of non-tangible, is often as simple as feeling like our joints are achy, and we transition towards healthier oils and we can start feeling like there's less inflammation, less swelling in our joints, and just feeling kind of less achy every day, which is a nice way to feel. So for cold cooking, olive oil is a really good one. And then for hot cooking, olive oil has a smoking point that's lower than other things. So you have to be careful about, for example, I make popcorn stovetop on a regular basis. Olive oil, you can't get to that high a temperature. So I recommend also having an oil such as canola oil, sunflower oil, or avocado oil that has a much higher smoking point, still has the health qualities that we want, but allows you to cook at higher temperatures. Those three oils, just to say them again, avocado, sunflower, and canola oil, are also a neutral flavor. So if you don't want the olive oil flavor in certain foods, you can use those for cold cooking or for other cooking as well. So I'm going to use the olive oil here. And we're going visually here. So the biggest ratios that we're trying to get is between our oil and our acid here. And in acid, you can use all kinds of different vinegars. So here I'm using red wine vinegar. You can use any vinegar that you enjoy. I like red wine vinegar as kind of a neutral. Some people like apple cider vinegar. Balsamic vinegar is a lot sweeter, so just be aware of that if you're using balsamic vinegar, that it adds a sweetness, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just knowing that you're adding that flavor. I'm gonna pour that in there. And with the ratios here, again, we're going ratios. You want either a 2-to-1, so the oil should be more, and a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1. So you can literally just eyeball it. And I'm going to add a little bit more acid, and we're using lemon. You can use lemon, you can use lime. If you're at home and you're making dressing and you realize you ran out of vinegar, you can use lemons, limes, oranges. So acid is acid is acid. It's going to add different flavors, but as far as from a culinary standpoint, it will fit the same role. I'm just squeezing that right in there. And a couple pits got in there, but I'm okay with that. And now I'm going to add a little bit of salt. And when you think about salt, we talked earlier about the goal of the salt is to augment flavor. The type of salt makes a big difference as well. So here I'm using a sea salt that actually the salt crystals are pretty big. If you picture you're baking or you're cooking where you're actually measuring out, or even here where I'm grabbing a pinch, if I grab a pinch of, say, table salt, the table salt crystals are really tiny. So if I get a teaspoon of that, I'm adding a lot more sodium to my food than if the salt crystals are bigger with things like sea salt or kosher salt. So most recipe books are actually starting to tell you not only to use kosher salt, but even tell you which type. So if I recommend you want to go for the red box because it has larger salt crystals, it'll make your food less salty when you're cooking with it. Now we're going to add a little bit of Dijon mustard. And you don't need to add the Dijon. The basic things you want to absolutely have are your oil, your vinegar, a little salt and pepper, and that could be it. Dijon adds some umami. It actually also helps the oil and vinegar emulsify or mix better. As we know, oil and water don't like to mix. The Dijon mustard actually helps that come together a little bit more. And then I'm going to show you a really fun way to add a little bit of garlic flavor. So if you take your knife, you turn it flat. This is a clove of garlic. It still has the peel on it. And I'm turning it flat. I'm moving my hand so I'm not putting my fingers anywhere near the blade, and I'm stomping down on it. It's a really good way to get frustration out from the day. And now it's just like this. I'm actually going to add it there. I'm going to remove it after about half an hour when I start using it, but it's infused with some of that garlic flavor. And then last but not least, one of my favorite tools in the kitchen, a little pepper. And I'm just going to cover this up. And this is a great thing for kids to do as well if you want them to do something in the kitchen. I'm just going to mix it. So you see here, so a little bit of the paper from the garlic, but you see here that it's emulsified, so the separation is not there anymore. It may separate again. You can remix it before you put it on your salad. This is as basic as it gets. This is what you would want to make and then store in your refrigerator. Then the day of, if you want to switch it up and add a bunch of herbs from your garden, you can do that, or herbs that you have from the grocery store. You can also add a little bit of mayonnaise or yogurt if you want a creamier dressing. So think of this as really your basic. You can also add some spice if you wanted to make more of a kind of Mexican themed salad. So this is just your basic, really good thing to have and to know how to do. Once you've made any dish, remember that it's not necessarily finished. A lot of times when we follow a recipe, especially when we're starting to get comfortable cooking, following recipes is essentially like having this guiding hand. And the goal is to learn big strokes on how to cook and then to start getting that comfort. Like I mentioned, that if I didn't have vinegar, I could use all citrus in there, and to have that comfort of the ratios and more the simplification rather than saying, oh no, I don't have vinegar, so I can't make dressing today. The other part is making sure you taste it and then adjust. I'm opening up my dressing. Make sure if you do use tasting spoons, even if it's just in your household, to not re-dip. No double dipping. It's got a really nice flavor. I'm gonna add a little bit more salt, and I'm in the mood to put herbs, but we're doing the basic today. But if I just did herbs, I'm gonna show you a sneaky way. For example, thyme. This is thyme. You take it, the thyme leaves grow essentially almost like a Christmas tree, like they grow upward. If you pull down, all the leaves actually come out right in your hand. So against the grain essentially. And I can just put those herbs right in there. And I'm gonna add a little bit of salt and a little bit more pepper. So the point of this is to not feel like maybe you are disappointed in your original. That's your first draft, so to speak, and you can adjust flavors. And the more you learn, you might taste this and say, oh, it's so oily. Okay, then let's add more acid. And the same thing, you can continue balancing it. And the beautiful thing about things like dressing, it's incredibly forgiving. If you're doing something like baking where you're making cakes, that's when you really want to measure much more carefully. So we're gonna put the dressing off to the side, and now we're gonna start making our kitchen sink salad. And the reason that I love that name is this idea of how do I decrease food waste? A lot of times when we start cooking and making food at home, we realize there's a lot that doesn't get used. Maybe because we followed a recipe and it asked for 1 ounce of cheese and now I have a little bit extra cheese left over, or I made some garbanzos for something else and I have something left. So this is a great way to use those little bits and pieces. Might be a good thing to use if you tend to go grocery shopping on a certain day, the day before you go grocery shopping. Not only do you do inventory of what I have, what I may need to buy at the store, but also then using those pieces to create a delicious meal. So we're gonna start with greens. It could be any green that you want. This is triple wash. They do have a lot of this, makes your job a lot easier. I hate washing lettuce. There's certain things, my husband is an amazing dishwasher and he's really good at washing lettuce. Some reason when I wash lettuce, it still has some of the grit. I don't know why. I can make fantastic, elaborate dishes, but washing lettuce is not my forte. So here we have triple wash. This one's arugula and spinach. Again, it doesn't matter. This is where seeing what you like and working with that. So if you have a family that maybe only likes iceberg lettuce, not the best, it doesn't have as much nutrition. Again, the darker you get on those greens, the more nutrition you're gonna get. But if that's your starting point and you or your spouse or partner or your kids are willing to have that, let's start there. So we're just gonna put this on a big platter. And I love triple wash. It truly, you don't need to wash it again when you come home. And now we're gonna start creating around it. And again, as I'm doing this, I'm still thinking about that plate. So I know I'm gonna have plenty from the fruit and vegetable kingdom. And I'm gonna see like, okay, we had corn on the cob the other day. I had one left over. I can't get anyone to just eat corn on the cob again. So let me teach you a trick on how to get this to work for me. And you can do this with raw corn. You actually don't need to cook the corn to eat it, which is pretty cool. So you wanna make sure you have a straight edge. So this one had a little bit of a stem, so I cut that off. And then you can have a bowl and you can put, again, those mason jars coming into play, vertical. And you're just gonna cut down to get those kernels. It might make a little bit of mess, but that's okay. That's part of cooking, and just embrace the mess, especially if you have kids that are cooking in the kitchen with you, or a spouse or a partner or otherwise that are a little messier, just let it go. They're in the kitchen with you, which is pretty cool. So you just make your way around it. We actually did a really cool cooking class where we had kids age 2.5 all the way to 95-year-old woman. And the 95-year-old decided this is the activity she wanted to do over and over. And I must say I was a little bit nervous, but we had no cut fingers that day, which is pretty exciting. So if I were to do this, I would choose, now that I see this bowl, I would choose a slightly bigger bowl because I did notice we made a little extra on the sides, but that's okay. So now I'm taking this corn. This is raw corn. It could be cooked corn. It could be grilled corn. It doesn't matter. And you want to just place it on your dish. So we have our corn. Next I look and I see we have some leftover walnuts from those overnight oats that I made. So I'm going to use some of those in my salad. This gives me some healthy oils, and it doesn't have to be walnuts. You can use almonds, you can use peanuts. My biggest recommendation, like we talked about, always having control over your salt, your fat, your sugar. So if you like roasted nuts, it's better to get roasted, unsalted, because often nuts are really healthy, but that is a really tricky place where you can often get a lot of extra salt. I'm going to use these walnuts. And now I'm going to use some garbanzo beans today. These are canned, rinsed. The rinsing takes away some of the extra sodium. And the cool thing about garbanzo beans specifically is that the liquid that comes off of the garbanzo beans is actually called aquafaba, and you can use it for a lot of plant-based cooking, like making meringues. And it's amazing how many recipes are slowly coming out of the uses of the chickpea liquid, but only with canned, which is really interesting, and only with chickpeas or garbanzo beans. It's the same thing, two names for the same thing. The other part to realize is don't feel guilty about using canned beans. I like to soak my beans, and often I've woken up from a deep sleep and remember that I forgot to soak my beans the night before, and that's okay. There's a quick way you can make beans on your own, but a starting point is just to get more, essentially, days or meals where you're using plant-based proteins like garbanzo beans. So these rinsed, and they can be raw, which is one of the great things about garbanzo. Let me go back. Not raw, but you don't need to do anything else after you've taken them out of the can. You can use them as is. You do not want to eat beans raw, okay? Let me make that clear. All right, now we have a little bit of cheese. Cheese, when we think of dairy products, and we talked about wanting to move towards healthier choices, fermented dairy products like yogurt and also cheese form are much healthier for you than in the natural, in the dairy form. It doesn't mean it's a health halo by any means, but just having an ounce here or there is adding fantastic flavor. And I realize I'm a little bit biased. My father's from Switzerland, and I can't not love cheese. So this is something that I love cheese, and I've learned to find that balanced relationship with cheese where I'll have some cubes and get that umami and that salty and that deliciousness that I love about cheese, but not having just endless amounts of cheese, because that does have a lot of saturated fat, which can increase our risk of heart disease and stroke. So with this, I'm just going to take a piece. This is Gruyere cheese. It could be Manchego. It could be hard cheddar. Again, any cheese that you enjoy in your household. And maybe you've been making sandwiches during the week and you have a little piece left over. If cheese is starting to get a little bit of white fuzzy on the outside, you can actually cut that off, especially for hard cheeses, and use the other aspects. So don't feel like you need to throw your cheese away as soon as it gets any fuzz around it. Very different deli meat or otherwise. As soon as it's got any white or scum, you want to get rid of it and avoid deli meats as much as possible. So again, my end point is to have bite-sized pieces. So I'm going to cube this Gruyere. Clean off my knife here. Okay, cut one more piece here. Same thing, I'm rocking, just as a reminder, I'm holding my knife properly, I'm tucking my fingers. Okay, perfect. So this is looking good, but notice that it's pretty much got the green and we got lots of browns and pale yellows. Well, you know what? It needs more color. And guess what? Those produce is going to give me that color. So red peppers. I love red peppers. I feel like green peppers are what we see mainly available, and some people don't like the flavor of that. Yellow peppers and red peppers sometimes have a higher price point, so if you see them on sale, it's a great time to catch them. I'm going to teach you a really great, easy way to cut these. I'm just going to clean off my surface here. Okay, so when you have a sweet pepper, you want to stand it upright. I'm clawing my fingers again, and you're going to cut around vertically. So notice as I'm doing this, I now am pretty much have all edible parts on this side, and all the seeds and the pith, which is the white part, are now separated. which makes it really easy to cut, and there's less kind of digging around potential cutting yourself. I can still use that bottom part, so I'm going to cut that out. This I'm going to put in my little compost container I have going on here. And again, what am I going for? Are bite-sized pieces. If I'm cutting for a salad and I know I want bite-sized pieces, but maybe tomorrow for lunch my kids love sliced peppers, or maybe there's somebody in the household that only likes slices, this is the good time to start separating out. So you want sharp knife, skin side up, and you're going to cut slices. Put these to the side, so that'll be for my lunch tomorrow. So I plan to have a hummus. And then for the other ones, so the reason I say that is to think about, I'm in the kitchen, I'm cutting produce. Is there one more use I can get, or two more uses from my time that I'm using in the kitchen? So I'm adding brightness of color. And as I'm cutting this, I want to make it clear the reason I talk about the knife holding. Often we get this tendency of having that finger above, and you don't have as much control over your knife. So that's why you want to check in with yourself and make sure that you're doing that pinch grip between the first and second digit. Okay, I have plenty there. And this one we'll use in a different way. But again, because I have enough there, I'm not going to put this back in the fridge. If I slice it and put it out, people will eat it rather than food waste. Okay, let's put these to the side. Now, what do we have here? We have radish. So this is another color. Radish has a nice kind of bite to it. Some people love it, some people don't. Roasted radishes are incredible. It's a great snack just by itself. Some people like them whole. I like them thinly sliced just to give me a little bit of that flavor. So again, I cut off both ends, rocky, flat it out for safety. And now I'm just making really thin slices. When it starts getting to be smaller, then I get concerned. I can actually just flip it down to flat side again and then cut again. Okay, so a little radish there. Do one more radish. Cutting both ends off, getting to a flat end as quick as possible. Okay, perfect. What else do we have? So the cool part is in nature, there's this thing that makes me so sad in our farming is that we've gotten to the point where we often make carrots and only we're used to seeing, for example, orange carrots, or watermelon only as red watermelon. Nature makes them in all different kinds of colors. So if you're able to find them in different colors, here we have yellow carrots, white carrots, purple carrots. Not only will they be interesting to look at, but each one will bring in different nutrients as well. So today I'm in the mood for purple. And you don't need to peel carrots. There's a lot of vegetables that we don't need to peel. Carrots is a really good example. The outside, as long as you wash them really well, you are going to get more fiber, and there's actually other nutrients on the outside of it that you're missing out if you're peeling it. So again, here I'm just making rounds. I'll show you the inside of these carrots are beautiful. I don't know how well you can see, but we have this purple and then it's almost yellow right in the middle. And again, it's just, nature's beautiful and we want to take that into our bodies. Okay. So as you notice I'm plating here, I'm really going with adding more color and again, more interest. And this is the bits and pieces that could be in my fridge at the end of the day. So the goal is not to say, okay, now I have to go find purple carrots and yellow carrots. And it's not to stress you out. It's actually a great way to use those ingredients so you have less food waste, which can often stress us out. We're wasting money, we're not being kind to the environment. We're going to add avocado. Avocado is a fantastic, if we think of oils and we think of, like we talked about, let's get to a point where we have the least processed. So avocados are even better for us than avocado oil. Olives are better for us than olive oil because that's their natural form. So that's just something to keep in mind. Avocados, we're going to just talk about how to slice them so you don't slice your finger. We're making our way around the avocado. And now I'm going to twist it, and the pit will end up on one side. One of the number one reasons for people cutting themselves is removing the pit. So I recommend putting the avocado half on the cutting board using your chef knife. All right, I went through the avocado pit. My hand is nowhere near, okay? Often people will do this and they miss and they end up with a big slash on their hand. Now you're going to twist, and that releases the pit. And then you can slice it. I mean, you don't want to slice your finger. You want to slide it off the pit, and now you have your pit separate. My fingers and hands are intact. And this you can actually scoop out depending on what shape you want. You can use a butter knife to be safer, or carefully using a chef knife to make slices. One direction. The reason this is a little bit safer than the pit removal is I'm not going with full force. I'm gently cutting through. And then we're using a spoon to scoop out. So I went both directions to get bite-sized pieces, and I'm adding that to my salad as well. All right. A couple more things I want to add. I have so many wonderful choices here. So green onions. Cool thing about green onions is if you use the green onion and actually you put the root side back in water, within a few days it actually starts shooting up again. So it just regenerates itself. So it's a really fun activity to reuse to make new food at home, but also if you do have young ones or like myself that you get excited by things like this. You can use both parts of a green onion, the white and the red, the white and the green. So some people choose one color because they like the aesthetics of it, but you can use all the way through. So we're gonna just start at the green side and rocking back and forth, fingers tucked. So as I'm doing this, notice I'm slowly moving my fingers back to make room for my knife. I think we need two more colors, and we'll be done here with our salad. It's a good idea to have a cloth to kind of clean off your area. Things will accumulate. You can also encourage you to have a bowl where you're putting your, ideally compost is something you can reuse to, again, keep yourself as organized as possible. Also a small garbage, so you're not having to walk all over the place. So we call this mise en place, of having everything at arm's reach and ready to use. Same thing again, I'm lifting it and cutting around. And there you go. Again, there's all the seeds and the pith in the middle. And making my slices. Okay, so notice we're adding bright colors there. If you had like half a breast of chicken or some steak left, that would be something else that could go on this plate. We're making this a vegetarian. I can't say fully plant-based because we have our cheese there, but again, it's a little bit of cheese, so really mainly plant kingdom here. Okay, we're getting there. And just to show you guys, if you had kids, you got these squiggly things they can do. You might not want them to handle a sharp chef knife, but maybe one of these squiggly, and you just press down and it makes really fun shapes. And it's something that could keep them entertained and also help you. And then again, aesthetics, you got to let go. If you're type A and you want things a certain way, got to loosen up when the kids are in the kitchen. And because they can also pick up if you're feeling really anxious, if they're making a mess. So welcome the mess. Get dirty in the kitchen. It's okay. Cleanup's okay. You can put some music on, rock out while you clean up. Let's see. I think we're pretty much done. We'll use one orange carrot. So my kids always grew up with non-peeled carrots, and they went to Montessori. And one of the activities they have at Montessori is peeling a carrot and cutting and then serving it to all their classmates. And my kids had never peeled a carrot before because we don't do that at home. So they actually made little snakes. So they served the peels and then they served the slices and then they walked around and served everybody because they couldn't imagine wasting the peel. And I just thought that was the sweetest thing ever. And the teacher definitely told us about that one that day. All right, got our carrots there. If you do have planters and you want to grow a little bit of food, you can get carrots grow from seed really well. Potatoes do too, so that's a really fun way of having a little bit of food growing in your own space. So we have finished our salad here, so I'm going to show you what it looks like, and you can add some fruit if you wanted to. So this is how I would bring it to the table, so everyone can ooh and ah over the aesthetics of it. And then I would re-emulsify my dressing here, dress it, toss it, and then serve it to everybody. Okay, so this is really, I want to touch base again. So we are hitting our marks, nutritional marks, which is always how I want to think about it. We have a ton of greens, lots of parts of the rainbow, lots of different parts of the plant. So I have my root vegetables here in the carrots. I have my like I said, my greens. I have my really healthy oils through the avocado, through the walnuts. I have a little bit of umami or depth of flavor with those little cubes of cheese. And again, lots of variety. I have my plant-based protein with the garbanzo beans. And then the dressings, again, going to give me more healthy oils. And that, if you have kids that don't like the tartness of it, you can add a little drizzle of honey, and that often will get kids to start liking dressing. So here you have it, main course. We have all our pieces here. Could be the idea of a salad. We think of the sad salad. This is the opposite of the sad salad. This is a salad with lots of colors, hitting those nutritional markers, and really delicious and a great way to use up little bits and pieces that you have. And that pretty much wraps up our main course. And we're gonna finish off with dessert, and you're gonna see how simple and satisfying this is. So this is something we often have in our house, and this is the pieces that I was talking about earlier of thinking about when we think of dessert flip, thinking about what are the pieces that we want to get. So even with dessert, working towards your palate, wanting that sweetness that nature gives us, which are the berries. And then we have chocolate. And having a variety of different chocolate bars. So here we have one that's infused with orange flavor. We have a sea salt. You can have any different kinds. This is actually a really fun way for the household to sit down together at the end of a meal and just, again, enjoy that conversation. And adding different bars of chocolate, you can even get 70% cacao from different origins and see if people can see the different nuances, the different flavors that are in there. And then again, those nuts. So we think of when we think of snacks and when we think of desserts, this is really simple and a great way to just add that little bow at the end of a meal without adding just loads of sugar and fat that our body just doesn't need. That's it on the dessert.